So, my talk this morning, following on from Catherine's talk, Eat the Toast, is called Pick Up the Poo. And thanks to Catherine for this koan, which I think may be the koan that's found me. A student of the way asked young man, "What is Buddha?" Young man replied, "Dried shit stick." When I first started to think about this talk, I thought about the big events in my life that have shown me how practice has impacted on me, because that's when I really noticed the effect it has had. I've shared some of these moments with most of you, sitting with my mum when she was dying, when my brother died. These were markers, significant moments, when I recognised the larger impact, slow accumulation of a greater presence and less self-imposed drama, and was grateful to be on this path. But as I've been going about my life and contemplating the question of why I practice and why it's working on me rather than me doing it, I've thought about the small everyday things that indicate that to me. I can't pronounce his name. Franz Ostaseski says, "The habits of our lives have a powerful momentum that propels us towards the moment of our death. The obvious question arises, what habits do we want to create? Our thoughts are not harmless. Our thoughts manifest as actions, which in turn develop into habits, and our habits ultimately harden into character. Our unconscious relationship to thoughts can shape our perceptions, trigger reactions, and predetermine our relationship to the events of our lives." While this sounds a little psychological at first glance, the point is that when sitting zazen, we cannot help but notice our thoughts. And with a little experience, we develop that habit in everyday life. Once we begin to see through our thoughts, we can begin to reduce our suffering. Or a better way of putting it, we can reduce the suffering of us and those around us. So I want to add that while it's difficult to talk about why I practice without making it sound as though it's all about me, we practice for the benefit of everybody, and we as individuals are not excluded from that. Barry Majid talks about the curative fantasies that we have when we first start practice, and probably continue to have. As time goes by, we let go of some of these fantasies or hold them more lightly. Carl Rogers says that only when we accept who we are can we begin to change. And Flint says that while practice is not a self-improvement program, we do experience change as a result of practice, just by becoming more fully ourselves. So in order to share the tiny ways I've noticed the changes that are a side effect of practice, I'd like you to accompany me on my morning dog walk. Little trigger warning, there's lots of mentions of dog poo. We haven't set off yet. I get up and open the curtains and it's a nasty day, wet and cold. I put on my waterproof coat and shoes and get out of the house. It's raining, I'm sleepy, but then I notice how lush and green the grass is. I notice that I'm warm and dry because there's no wrong weather, just the wrong clothing. I'm enjoying being outdoors in spite of my slight reluctance. The 3 dogs have suddenly got old and slow, almost as if it's overnight, and as they've done so, they've become even greater teachers for me. The little one who stays on the lead is going so slowly, because there's lots of exciting smells as we walk through the allotments. I catch myself impatiently pulling on her lead, dragging her off her feet, And then I see she's trying to poo, and I feel contrite. I realise that my belief that we need to cover a certain distance and they need a certain level of exertion to tire them out is out of date. We don't need to go anywhere. They just want to sniff and ponder and amble along. They just want to take in what's right under their noses, literally. I come back into my body instead of being ahead of it and notice the abundance all around me. I can still get back at the time I need to. There's nothing wrong and there's no need to rush. On my walk, I pay attention to those that I meet. I often say hello to people or just smile at them, which is common in Sheffield. This morning I say hello to someone I pass and they don't acknowledge me. And I sort of chuckle to myself as I remember going on a walk with Charlie, my son, a few weeks ago, and the same thing happened. And he went, "Oh, Mum, you got blanked." What I notice is that I don't experience that reaction as personal anymore. I respect that not everyone feels like greeting others with a smile. I don't always. I was talking to my partner about this, and he said that while his practice is also to greet people, he worries about intruding on people. And I realise that I do modify my greeting to the best of my ability, but in some ways I'd rather risk a smile, a little smile, or just a tentative hello because of the reaction I've so often had. I've seen people's faces transformed by a friendly greeting. I think practice has helped me to step out of ego and not be absolutely desperate to show that I'm the kind of person that talks to everybody, but also not to take it personally. If somebody doesn't acknowledge my hello, I definitely would have succumbed to both of those in the past. On the walk, I go past the football pitch and see some sweet wrappers and litter. I pick them up and take them to the bin, not because I feel like I'm a good person, but it gives me satisfaction to recognise it's my responsibility as much as it's anybody else's. And I'm grateful every day that I live in a place where that little action can make a big difference. We walk down the hill and cross the road to the other park. We head towards the cafe. It stopped raining, so I leave the dogs off the lead thinking that there'll be nobody outside the cafe. And anyway, the dogs are better behaved these days. Just as we reach the cafe, the little one on the lead starts pooing. And then Marley, the big field spaniel, runs across and jumps up at someone's table and steals their food. I bellow his name at the top of my voice, which makes everybody around look round. And then, in full view of them all, I rush over to Marley, grab him by his collar and grab him, pull him off, and he falls flat on his back because he's unsteady on his legs and he's not expecting it. There's no resistance. He gets straight up and is unfazed, but I'm painfully aware that there's lots of people watching this unfold and thinking, how rough is that woman with her dogs? And my very visible and uncontained frustration, and I drag the dogs off quickly, feeling really exposed and humiliated. As soon as I get away from the scene, I have more clarity. I breathe and ground myself. I walk back towards the table where the couple is sitting that Marley stole the food from and offered to buy them something as compensation and apologise profusely. They say they'd finished anyway and no need, and anyway, the dogs are so cute. I wave at my neighbour who's sat outside and has seen the whole thing unfold. And then I go and pick up the abandoned poo, which luckily has not been trodden in. How can it be, I think, that the shame subsides so quickly for me these days? Partly it's because these particular people have been so forgiving, which I'm grateful, consciously grateful for. Also, I remember some words from Tara Brach where she talks about how practice can help us to love ourselves into healing and be more fully who we are. I interpret that as accepting more fully who we are, quick temper and reactivity included. I'd love to have been more mindful in that moment, but on this particular day, I accept that I wasn't. There have been many factors that have contributed to my growing ability to be kind to myself, and a major one has been the experience of being in this Sangha, of being seen, of having my flaws and mistakes and insecurities witnessed, and being loved and accepted, not in spite of them, but inclusive of them. When I first began this practice, I thought there was something I had to believe in or subscribe to, and I was wary of that. After my second ever residential retreat, I came back and said to my Sangha members that I was done with Zen, but that I would still sit with them because I enjoyed sitting with them. It makes me laugh now because I think, well, I believe that Zazen is just sitting with friends, no beliefs necessary. Ben Connolly says, when we sit down to practice meditation, something interesting happens. Most of us see lots of thoughts come and go. We think about what's on the agenda for the day. We recall the lovely food we had last night. We wonder how soon the bell will ring so we can stand up and get our sleepy leg to wake up. Then perhaps we get annoyed at these thoughts. We want to be just sitting, but here we are, sitting and thinking. But this is just sitting. Thoughts are not separate from just sitting, because just sitting is the state of not separateness from anything that is always here, whether we know it or not. If we make a serious commitment to just sitting, we may realize this not separateness, but it's nice to remember that it's always realizing itself anyway. Practice has helped me not to become overwhelmed by the constant onslaught of global news coverage. I feel the suffering. Of course I do. Practice does tenderize us, as Catherine reminded us. But it's also equipped me to take care of myself, as John mentioned, strong back, soft front. When I do feel overwhelmed by the suffering in the world, I try to remind myself that we can only respond to what's in front of us. Picking up someone else's dog poo on the path, because I really understand that stepping in it could spoil someone's day. It's not saintly or glamorous, but it's taking care of what is there. Looking a homeless person in the eye and saying hello instead of ignoring them. These are tiny adjustments, but it is my practice that has shown me that these tiny things are important. Getting over my humiliation at having my temper exposed in public. I can only recover quickly because I practice I chant the four practice principles on a weekly basis. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Once we've begun to have these experiences of being connected to everyone and everything, then your tiny actions do just matter, as I've said. Susan Moon says, it's as if you are living in a room that you think is the whole world. You don't even know that there are walls around you until suddenly a window opens, the blinds are drawn aside, and you see a vast mountain range beyond. When the blinds are closed again and you can no longer see out, you don't return to your former limited view because now you know that the mountains are there. You know that you live among them. Thank you.